Right, to Ukraine now, and Germany's new defence minister says he plans to visit Ukraine in the next 4 weeks. Berlin is facing continued pressure to allow the shipment of German-made Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Recent talks in Ramstein failed to convince Germany to provide the battle tanks to Kiev. Let's get the latest now from retired Air Vice-Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Kimberly.
Good afternoon. Right, let's talk about Germany. Why are they so reticent to send these tanks?
The pressure's been ramping up, hasn't it, on Germany? And the danger is it looks like they're being difficult, when actually the truth lies, it's far from the truth. The history as ever is tied up in history. At the end of the Second World War, the Allies, determined to make sure that Germany could not actually mount any further global wars, dismantled the German military, but recognised they needed to have some defence. The Allies put military bases across Germany. In fact, my first tour was on one of them at RAF Gütersloh in Germany, and the recent meeting of the world leaders was at Ramstein, the USAF military base in the middle of Germany. Of course, then the Cold War came along and Germany found itself at the front line of that. So the Allies relented, allowed it to build up its military capability, but they were absolutely firmly only on the defence. So the German military was not allowed to collect intelligence on any of its people, was not allowed to use the military internally, couldn't have nuclear weapons. And all of that was enshrined in the constitution. Likewise, for the German population, the two world wars cast a dark shadow across their history. So whilst they were very content to help Ukraine with defensive capability, it's a completely different issue to then start providing offensive capability. And the recent poll has demonstrated that there's not widespread support for that.
No, it's an interesting one. Let's talk about Russia. A politician there, and also a close ally of Mr. Vladimir Putin, threatened that if the Western weapon deliveries go ahead, it's going to lead to a global catastrophe. That's what he said. I mean, what do you make of that sort of rhetoric?
The Putin ally concerned is Vyacheslav Volodin here. He's the Speaker of the lower house in Russia. Very threatening rhetoric. But to be brutally honest, the last few days we've seen lots of this sort of rhetoric, all obliquely referring to potential nuclear threats. The irony here, of course, is that Russia is quite happy to threaten and invade another country, but as soon as it feels threatened, it starts to wail and moan about it. The two main reasons why this rhetoric, though, is ramped up is, one, Russia recognises that tanks could have a decisive military capability in the war, particularly Western tanks could prove decisive. And secondly, they recognise the constitutional challenge that Germany currently faces, and by ramping up the rhetoric, making it even more difficult for Germany to side and support the deployment of tanks.
Now, Russia's also said that it's announced this major long-term expansion to its armed forces. What do you make of that?
That was Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu announcing a shown here, three-year plan, going up to 1.5 million. It's even bigger expansion than before, another 11% bigger. All the rhetoric was around an increased threat from the West. They're also looking at putting a new army corps up in Karelia there, just off the side of Finland, almost certainly a direct response to Finland acceding to NATO membership and responding to that threat. More concerning, though, is Russia's also not just about people, it's also mobilising its defence industry. Putin has been talking to some of the defence industry leaders, trying to get them onto a war footing with a long-term strategy. The real question from my perspective is, what's the West's response to this? Up till now, the West has largely been providing what's available in military support rather than what's needed. And raiding the sort of West's war chests has served us reasonably well for a year, but it's unlikely to prove a really good match for Putin's long-term military strategy.
OK. Sean, thank you so much. We'll see you in an hour.